Welcome, fellow seekers of challenge and triumph, to the Suffer Sooner podcast. Join us on a journey where ordinary souls embark on extraordinary endeavors. From the relentless grind of gravel to the punishing gauntlet that is triathlon, we've tasted our fair share of suffering. So fellow endurance warriors, let's lace up our shoes, strap on our goggles, and dive headfirst into the challenge, knowing that with every step, stroke, and pedal forward, we grow stronger together.
Well, welcome to episode number 14. We are joined today by Britta. She's one of longtime friends of me and Serena and Danny, and she is a mom, a wife, a lawyer, a multiple Ironman finisher, a multiple 70.3 Ironman finisher, an ultra runner, and an ultra swimmer. So I don't know if there's anything I've left out.
Is there anything she hasn't done? Can we just list the things that Britta has not done?
Cycling.
Ultra. Okay, so you haven't done any ultra cycling events.
What a slacker!
Yet. I know.
Right? So if you were going to do an ultra cycling event, what do you think the one would you do? Would you do like a across a state or something like that, or would you dip your toe into the gravel craziness like us?
The only one that has ever appealed to me is Ragbri, riding across Iowa. Really just sitting for that long. It's okay for like century rides, but I don't think that those are really considered the ultra cycling events. But longer than a century ride just does not have the allure to me that it does to the two of you.
Yeah, I did Ragbri when I first moved here. And it was probably one of the most life-changing events I think I've had. It's just basically you were kind of living as this cycling nomad that traveled across Iowa. And it was just like you got up in the morning, tore down your tent, dropped it off at the shuttle service. Then you got on your bike and you rode however fast you wanted. I did it with a couple of friends of mine, and we rode, semi-fast every day. But like you would ride, you'd get to a place, you would eat lunch, and then you would get back on the bike, and then you'd stop, and then you'd, have, a pie on the side of the road. And it was just this weird traveling circus chaotic lifestyle that just was amazing. It was one of the best times I've ever had, and it was a whole week of that. And by the time I got done, I needed a new saddle because the one saddle that I had was just not worth it. And but yeah, it gave me a super appreciation of what you can see on the bike, for relatively, it was hard, don't get me wrong, but for the amount of effort we basically rode for, I don't know, let's say like 6 hours, 5 to 6 hours a day. And then you had the rest of the day to kind of recover and eat and shower and, go see a movie and stuff. So it was really cool. Just having the sole focus, just being riding your bike to the next town. So, but yeah.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. And I know some people only do it for a couple days. They don't necessarily cross the entire state of Iowa, but certainly if I were to ever do something ultra cycling, it would still be on the road. It would not be gravel or mountain or anything else off-road.
Across a whole country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no.
You're not doing the Continental Divide or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, maybe a backpacking trip. That would be kind of cool.
Be good time.
Like just on road, yeah. So so out of the crazy list of stuff that you have done, what do you think is probably one of the things that you've done that seemed like the hardest from the start to go? Like you were just like, I don't know if I'm going to ever be able to finish this.
Definitely my first full Ironman.
Okay.
It is just so long, and that healthy fear of I genuinely don't know if I can finish this is truly what got me out of bed every morning to go do the training. It made me not skip on the hard days and really kept me going because I was genuinely scared. I don't know if I can actually cross the finish line. And that was maybe one of the first things I had ever done where I didn't know with certainty that I could finish it.
When did you know that you were going to finish the first Ironman? Did it happen? Did you get that realization during training? Was it like mile 25 of the run? I'm just curious. Like when did you know it was in the bag?
I think I thought it probably for the first time on about mile 13 of the run of the Ironman itself. Certainly never during training.
I think that's exactly where I had it too.
Yeah,
But my first Ironman was Ironman Louisville, which no longer exists, but the run was a 2-loop run course. So mile 13, I was essentially coming by the finish line, and I saw it and I thought, I can make it back here. And I had a couple thoughts between there and when I did finally make it back to the finish line that I, questioned whether I actually would. But I don't think it was until I saw and heard those finish line sounds and saw the lights, and I was like, I can make it long enough to make it back here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think we were just talking about in one of the previous episodes about the mental side of training these events and things like that. So you just never know when it's gonna click that you're kind of over the hump and you can get this stuff done. And I think mile 13 of the marathon portion of an Ironman seems like the right place. I mean, I remember last year for Ironman last year, it was the same thing. Like, I think, hey, I did the loop one time. I know I can do the loop a second time. You look at your watch, you're like, yep, I can do this. So
Right.
it's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's wild that it was kind of all in the same place for us. I mean, I did have a feeling like when I started the swim that I would finish the swim, and then when I started the bike, I would finish the bike. But like as I was starting these events, as you're going from transition to transition, like when you start the run, like that's when like I was like, I don't know if I can finish this. Like, you just kind of sit there and you just go, I don't know, but I'm going to try to do the best I can. And I think that's lost on the whole, like you said, the whole training leading up to it is that, that fear of not, being able, like knowing that you're going to be able to finish it is I think one of the harder things to get over and being okay with.
So out of the crazy things you've done, like what would you say is your favorite type of event, like sport?
I really liked the ultra swimming. I really love triathlon. It truly is my love. I don't know that I will ever do another full Ironman, but I do want to do more halves and shorter. I'm actually doing a sprint this weekend, and I think it'll be my first sprint since 2020. And
Wow.
it's a whole new challenge compared to like an Ironman.
So how afraid of the sprint are you?
I am very scared of that run, despite the fact that my run is definitely the strongest of the 3 disciplines right now, based on my training this year so far. But to think about running really hard for a 5K is genuinely scary right now. It's just so different than just going long.
Yeah, running that, it's like I think of running long as like, oh, this is a little amount of pain and I'm okay with a little amount of discomfort. But when you're thinking like, oh, I'm going to put myself in the most amount of pain that I possibly can tolerate and do that for as long as it takes for me to finish is like a new, I totally understand that fear. It's just like sometimes I feel that the shorter events are harder than the longer events for sure.
They can be. But outside of triathlon, and certainly for the ultra distances, the swimming is what I love the most, and what I would plan to do more ultra swimming events in the future. I don't know that if I'll ever do another ultra marathon, and I already said I don't think I'll ever do another full Ironman. But ultra swimming, I definitely want to get more into.
Okay. How is the so we're going to get to the Mackinac Island swim, but like, how is the suffering for swimming different from like, let's say like, Ironman or anything like that? Is it kind of on the same level where you're kind of getting in a groove and then you just kind of keep going, or is there highs and lows and peaks and troughs to that kind of like training / suffering / getting your head around that distance type stuff?
The training for ultra swimming is so much more lonely than it was for either Ironman or an ultra marathon. Because when I did my Ironman, Travis, you and I did a lot of long rides together. You weren't necessarily there for maybe the entire century ride that I was doing in training, but you were there for like 60 miles of it or something. And someone else might be there, for another 30. And when I was training for ultra marathon, same thing. I may not have someone who was doing a full 17-mile run with me that day, but maybe they did a couple loops and I got 10 miles with someone. Versus the swimming. I mean, even if you are swimming in a lane next to someone, you're not chit-chatting, you're not encouraging each other. And candidly, there is no one who's willing to swim that long with me. But
I was going to ask, I'm surprised there weren't like a line of people waiting at the pool, like, hey, are you swimming 8 miles today? Because I really wanted to swim 8 miles today, and I can't wait to do it in this 25-yard pool.
You're like, I love reading through your Strava and it going, oh, I just have a 4K today. Like that's like people's peak swims for Ironman, and you're just like, oh, thank goodness it's only 4K.
I know it got to such a point, and I was like, I saw in my training plan one taper week, it was like 2,500 yard swim, and I was like, why even bother getting in the pool for only 20?
I don't even get out of bed for 2,500 yards.
You're like less than half an hour. Come on, man.
It just got to feeling so short. There were, there's always a lot of things. I think when you take on a new ultra distance thing, even though I grew up as a swimmer, I was a competitive swimmer from age 5 to 18. And that's, obviously what draws me in part to the ultra swimming now, but there were still a lot of challenges that I didn't expect. One of them was in a particular long pool session. It was like an 8,500 yard pool session. And I got to the point I could not stop coughing. And the pool that I am stuck swimming in is just not very well ventilated. And I don't have a doctor to back me up on this or anything, but I genuinely think that breathing in the chlorine for that long seriously was affecting my lungs, and I could not stop coughing. And it took a few days to kind of get out of my system, but it developed during that swim because I was in the pool area without any fresh air for like 4 hours. And I genuinely think it caused that. So there were random things like that would happen that I just could not have anticipated from anything else I've ever done.
That sounds so enjoyable. Just, reventilating chlorinated air for 4 hours. That just, I can't imagine why your lungs, right? Yeah. Why would your lungs be raw and aching from that? I can't imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. So my daughter's a lifeguard, and like, she has that chlorine cough. Every time they like have to, boost up the chemicals and stuff, she gets that cough because, as a lifeguard, you're on stand, you're there breathing in the air for way longer than anybody who's actually swimming, except for like us Britta for doing an 8,500 yard. The longest I've ever swam in a pool was 7,500 yards. So that was
that
it.
Is and
I coughed a lot after that, and I don't know if it was the chlorine or just the fact that I was trying to drown myself at the end there. But yeah, like you can develop that I mean, those chemicals, I mean, that you're just breathing it in. Like, people don't understand. You're not inches from the water. You're in the water breathing, basically splashed water in your, like, kind of in your mouth. Cause it's not like, as a swimmer, it's not like every breath that you take is, pristine and, perfectly timed so that like water doesn't go in your mouth. Maybe it is for you who's been swimming since you're, teenager. But for me, like there's a couple of times where I mistime my stroke and I kind of get a mouthful of water, or I didn't turn my head hard enough, or, all that kind of stuff. So does that kind of stuff happen to you too, Britta, or no?
Oh yeah, definitely. And it can happen in the pool. It certainly happens all the time in open water.
Yeah, because you get those weird waves from
A
different
weird wave,
angles.
you
Yep.
can't perfectly time it, or at least I'm not skilled enough to perfectly time it in the open water constant.
So yeah, it's wild. So let's move on to let's talk about this Mackinac Island swim. So if anybody doesn't know, like this Mackinac Island swim, you swim around Mackinac Island it's in Wisconsin, right?
Michigan.
No, Michigan, and it's in the big lake there, right?
Lake Huron, yes.
Lake Huron, and it's you did the 8.2 mile swim, right?
Yeah. Yes, I did. So Mackinac Island has there's no cars allowed on the island at all.
Okay.
But there's a path on the actual island where you can bike or walk or run around it, and it's paved, and it's 8.2 miles. And so that's been their shtick for a long time is, people ride the 8.2 miles, which I know to the three of us doesn't sound like a very far bike ride, but for a lot of people is quite the accomplishment, and they're very proud of it. So they've had this 8.2 mile branding for a long time. So then along came the swim a couple years ago, and they made it an 8.2 mile swim around the island as well.
Wow.
I'm sitting here trying to process it, so I can't get my head wrapped around an 8.2 mile swim. So I'm sorry, I cannot relate to this.
I mean, it's one thing to say like, oh, I went and ran 8 miles, right? Like that would take most of us, like, we're 10-minute mile pace. Okay, like say 80 minutes, hour and a half. Let's say hour and a half, right? You were in the water for almost 5 hours, right, Britta?
Yeah.
Yeah, and and just based on your background, it's not like you're not exactly just a rock in the water. Like I just sink. Like I can't keep my hips up. But you're like an actual swimmer. Like you're a fish in water, and it still took this long. And I'm like, how do you not just like shrivel up? I don't know. I can't get my head. I can't picture this, Britta. I can't.
It was the experience of a lifetime, and I did love it, but it makes me laugh looking back. Like I said, I was a competitive swimmer through high school, and I was what the competitive swimming community calls a long distance swimmer. But the longest distance that you swim in a pool is a mile, or 1,500 meters, or in yards, 1,650 yards. And so to go from that being distance, and really, even if you swim the 500-yard event or the 400-meter event, that's still considered being a distance swimmer. So to go from those being considered like the really long distances of high school, multiply that by 8 was really crazy.
Yeah. So other than, what was like your, I guess, the fueling plan on there? Were you doing a certain number of yardage and then you would eat, or did you just try to, wear like some kind of pack that you could, like floats behind you and you could siphon some, liquid nutrition, or did you eat solid food? Like how do you go about, I guess the first thing is, how do you go about fueling for an event like this?
So Mackinac Island swim is not a technical marathon swim under the official rules of marathon swimming, which has certain rules about what you can tow with you, what people can throw you off a boat, stuff like that. So this is a little bit less formal in that you're not having to adhere to those rules. And you're required in Mackinac Island swim to have a swim buoy attached to you just for visibility and safety reasons. So I got it's it's called like a donut swim buoy, and it has a little dry bag that you can roll up in the middle of the donut. And that's where I kept a ton of the honey stinger waffles and goo gels and a couple Cliff shot block sleeves. And then I had a Life Water straw. And so I could just stick the straw straight in the lake, drink from the lake, not have to haul around any liquids.
That's super smart. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's how I did the liquids. And then I would just pull out whatever sounded good among the waffles and stuff like that during the swim. And then they did have 2 aid stations on the island. And so you just swam up to shore and you could get other stuff. I did that. I did stop at one of the aid stations and grabbed a few potato chips just to get a different taste than all the sweet stuff that was in my pack.
Yep.
I know you guys have talked about that and mixing it up on some of the other podcasts. So I did do that and swim up to shore and grab some chips to get a different flavor in my mouth after all that time. But yeah, I would just, find a place. Luckily for that swim, you can just swim closer to the island and then you just stand up in the water and unfold my little dry bag, eat my little snack while I stand there and then move,
And back at it.
Yeah.
on.
And then get back at it. Yeah. Were you following like a plan? Was there like, like a certain number of yards, or were you just kind of going off a feel like, oh, I should probably eat now? Or was it a timing thing? Or
I tried to do it about every mile and just be checking my watch, because what I didn't realize about just swimming clockwise around an island was it was impossible to tell how far I went, to the point that I couldn't tell when we were swimming around the tip of the island, because the island just stays on my right the entire time.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit of an overcast day. And so I couldn't, use the sun position to gauge it or anything. So, and there were a lot of swimmers who commented that at the end about, having to ask kayakers or whatever, hey, have we gone around the tip of the island? Are we like on the back half of the island yet?
You're like, where am I?
Yeah.
And so I really just had to check my watch every so often and see how many yards I'd gone. And once I'd gone about a mile, if there was a good spot to get closer to the shore, or find some rocks that I could stand on to stop for a minute. That's kind of how I did it.
Okay.
So you mentioned solids. So did you have much solid food, or did you mostly liquid? Because I'm thinking about swimming, and solid foods probably didn't sound like it would settle too well. But I'm guessing you're eating such small amounts it wasn't even a problem.
Yeah, so I did do all solid foods just because I only had the Life Straw to drink straight water, and I just didn't want to haul the weight and stuff of a heavy bottle that would have, tailwind or scratch or some kind of liquid calories. But like anything else, you can train yourself to get used to swimming on foods. Unlike what our moms all told us as little kids, like you're not actually going to drown if you swim after you eat. And so, yeah, on some of the pool decks, I would have a couple honey stinger waffles, and I would just practice, eating those as quick as I could. And then, getting right back into the set that I was doing. So that did train my stomach to get used to digesting some of it while I was still moving.
Yeah. You're killing my excuses to get to the pool. Because I like to eat. So I just blame it on, I can't go to the pool because I just ate.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not a natural swimmer, or like what do they call it? I'm a late onset swimmer. So I didn't start swimming, freestyle, like in a pool until I was like 20, in my 20s. And I never felt like I was a true swimmer until I could actually eat like a sausage and egg biscuit before like swim practice, and then go and swim and not like feel queasy. I was like, now I'm a real swimmer. Cause like some, I would see these, I would see the high schoolers on the pool deck and they're just like, eating like, McDonald's cheeseburger in the parking lot before pool, like swim practice. I'm like, how don't you have swim practice? Like, yeah, we can eat this stuff. It's not a big deal. It's only an easy day. And I'm like, I can't even eat a waffle and go to the pool without like wanting to throw up. So I like Britta said, I eventually trained myself. Now I can actually eat. And that used to be a big thing in triathlon, that I couldn't eat breakfast beforehand because I would get really nauseous just because of the sloshing around in the pool and stuff. So yeah.
I want to know, how many attempts of sausage and egg biscuits did it take before you realized you were a real swimmer?
It only took 2.
Okay.
One when I thought I was ready, and then one when I knew I was ready.
I feel sorry for the people in the lane next to you.
The first time when I thought I was ready, I was burping.
You were not.
A lot. It was not. I was not ready. It was not a good time. So, what do you think what is the biggest takeaway from this swim, as far as like, did you have like a mantra that you kept saying, or were you just like, yeah, I can do this. This is not a big deal. I've done, 7 miles in the pool. This is just a lake. Like, come on.
I didn't have a particular mantra. I repeated different things that I've heard over the years to myself during the swim at different times, but no particular mantra. A few times just wanting to warm up because the water, we had been told, was 65 degrees, which is cold, but in a full wetsuit and stuff, it was going to be manageable. And I had done some open water swims earlier in the year in Texas in the spring, knowing what that felt like, and that was going to be okay. But there were a few areas that I'm glad I didn't know going in, because it would have hurt my mental state a lot more. But there were a few areas of the water where the water was more like 55 degrees, which is really freaking cold.
Yeah. That's like ice cream headache cold. Like you can swim into it and your head starts to hurt.
Exactly. And that happened kind of early on. And I do remember thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, my brain is just frozen and I can't feel my fingertips. The rest of my body was fine. I was in a full wetsuit because, again, the marathon swimming rules don't apply. So my body was mostly fine, but my head and my hands just hurt from the cold. But I was able to lie to myself and say, this is 65 degrees. You'll get used to it. It's fine. And I genuinely believed it, because they posted on the Facebook page that it was 65 degrees.
I saw it on Facebook. It had to be real.
It had to be real. And it was on the internet. It had to be real.
It's like Ironman water temperature. Oh, look, we're just at the cutoff for the wetsuit. Congratulations.
Right.
Yep.
Convenient. It's always right there.
Right there.
Yeah, it's right on the line. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the most important question, though, is, Britta, having done it, would you go back? Maybe not this particular one all over again, but would you go back and do it again, the 8.2 miles, and maybe even this event itself? But would you go back and do it again?
I would. I really loved Mackinac Island. I think anyone who's interested in getting into long distance open water swimming, it's a fantastic event, because it's not a high pressure event. There are tons of people around. They do care a lot about swimmer safety. So you never really have to be worried that you're in some super deep body of water away from anyone else. So it's a great introduction. I highly recommend it for that. But also, Mackinac Island itself is like truly one of the most idyllic places I have ever had the pleasure of visiting. So I would go back and do it again. I don't know if I will, just with, life and time. And
sure.
I don't live anywhere near Michigan right now. So we'll see. But it did. I mean, as soon as I was done, I was looking up other long distance open water swims, and none of them are going to work out this season. But I think, I've had some ideas planted for some other swims, especially in other freshwater. Saltwater swims, I got into reading about those, and like this woman swimming from the coast of California out to Catalina Island, like her tongue swelled up because of salt water after that many hours. And so there's just a few things about salt water that I don't know if I would swim 8.2 miles, or Catalina's 15 miles, if I would swim that far in saltwater. But a lot of freshwater events I do look forward to doing later in life.
Yeah, and that's awesome because it sounds like the vibe of this event, it was not like a race setup where you had people thrashing all over each other like a mass started Ironman or something. It sounds like it was a pretty inviting and welcoming atmosphere with just a lot of people with, the common commonality that, hey, we just want to come out here and have a good time. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's awesome.
Nice.
Hey, what about, go ahead, Travis.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so how does the swim, ultra swimming, like parlay into ultra running? I think you did the ultra run first, right? And then in the beginning of the year, and then later in the year you did the Mackinac Island. So which one did you feel was like the harder of the two?
Ooh, they're just different kinds of hard. I think the marathon may be harder for me, and potentially just because of my background in swimming made that one a little bit easier. But it also, it gave me such an aerobic base to build from, that even though then I'm going from, primarily using my legs to primarily using my arms in the swim, I had just a huge aerobic engine already built from the ultra marathon that made at least the distance and the stamina for the longer swims probably a lot easier than it would have been, without having done the ultra marathon a few months prior.
Right. So this it was the Crazy Desert 50K, and yes, you did it in 6.5 hours, which is 31.8 according to Strava, but we'll give you 32. I'm like 6.5 hours to run 32 miles. Like, even when I do a marathon, I don't think I'm gonna go as fast as I usually go. Like, if you were like, again, just the idea of running an extra 6 more miles after running a marathon.
It's not that much further.
Are you kidding me? It's not that much further. You saw me and Danny at the end of Mesa. Did we look like we were ready to run another 6 miles?
So here's the thing about ultra marathons versus marathons is I will never run another standalone marathon. Travis, you were with me for the last one I did, and it was straight up not a good time. But the ultra marathons, you don't have a pressure for a particular pace like you do, or like I put on myself, and like I think a lot of people put on themselves for a road marathon. And, you want the, sub 4 hour, the BQ, or just a PR or whatever when you're doing a road marathon, or, I want to stay, at this pace. But on the trails, that's like really never a thing, just because there's so much versatility in the terrain and the hills and the downhills and just stuff like that. So it takes a lot of the pressure off. So I would rather go at that pace for 6.5 hours than the harder pace at 4-something hours for a road marathon.
Alrighty. Still not,
I'm like,
still not sold.
You still got to sell me on this idea. So I gotta figure this out. So I'm trying to relate, I'm trying to figure this out. So I'm equating like a road marathon to road biking, and a trail marathon to gravel biking. Right. So
yeah,
that's how I think of it. If that's the right analogy to use. But Britta, I think what you're saying is, you kind of take all the pressure off of yourself. And now in these ultra marathon events, it's like the mental side of it is kind of clear. So you're just out there enjoying it, right? You're just trying to you stay on top of the terrain. You kind of find a pace and you just grind out the pace. But it's not I'm still trying to figure out how you're selling me on 6 more miles at the end of this marathon distance. It's still the distance. Like, you still got to get there. So I'm struggling, but maybe talk through, like, how was your approach for race day that day? So like in a marathon event, we for Mesa Marathon earlier this year, I mean, Travis and I both were like, okay, this is how we want to attack the first, 6 to 8 miles. And then when we get to this point in the race, we want to go, miles 10 through 15 at this kind of, effort. So maybe just like, how did you break the race down? How did you chunk it up so that you, you kind of had a goal to work toward, but you weren't putting too much pressure on yourself?
So my 50K was 2 laps, each 25K. And I'm lucky that this is essentially in my backyard here in San Angelo, Texas. And so I was able to train on the course a lot. So I know exactly where the hills are, where the super rocky terrain is, and where you can kind of make up some time on the course. And so mine was just very course specific with, even on the first lap when I knew it was going to be a cooler part of the day, I still forced myself to just hike up some of the hills to conserve that energy for later in the race, because I do think, when you're going to be out there 6+ hours, it's a lot of it is about energy conservation.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I wasn't necessarily competing against the field, I just wanted to finish. There's a saying, it's not about who goes the fastest, it's about who slows down the least. And so even just by hiking some of the steeper hills in the first lap when it was cooler and I still had the energy, conserving that energy allowed me to slow down less on the second lap when it was pretty hot by the end of it. So my strategy was, hiking some of the hills to conserve the energy, making up time on the flats, and taking advantage of the couple shady spots that there are, because we don't have tall trees here. So there's very, very limited shady spots, but knowing like, okay, that's where, I'll take some water in before then so that I can use those few minutes to cool my body down before I go back out in the sun and it's hot and all of that. So, and then it was a tale of 2 laps because it just truly got so hot. I think I started at 7 a.m. It was like in the 40s because we're in the desert. You have the big swings. And so it was going up to like the 80s by the afternoon. Wow. So my first lap, I finished in like just under 3 hours. So, finished by 10 a.m. It's still relatively cool, but then it starts to get hot quick. So second lap, I knew was going to be hot. And that strategy was really just about how do I keep my core body temp down, take a little ice from the aid stations or sprinkling water on, my wrists and my head and stuff like that to keep myself cool.
Yeah. I like that idea about, who slows down less. I think that resonates across a lot of these sports, a lot of these types of events, because I think sort of that conservation of your energy and managing your effort to that type of mindset can help a lot of people get through some of those most challenging efforts. That's some really good advice.
Yeah, it's definitely just about like, if this is going to take energy away from you the first time around, then, if you're feeling good, save it for the second time around. There's no harm in that part, because if this is the last time you have to climb this hill and and the first 3 times you've done it, you've walked it well, and the last time you're feeling like you should run it, then that's great. Then the defeat of you ran it the first time, but that took a lot out of you, and now you have to walk more of these hills that you would have been able to do. So yeah, just pacing it smart. I mean, that's just smart pacing and smart strategy too. Was it like a self-supported race, or what was the fueling strategy on this one as compared to the big swim?
This one was not necessarily self-supported. There are a bunch of aid stations, but I did have a Camelback that I carried with my water in it, so I could be continually sipping on it and not relying on the aid stations, because I'm trying to remember, but I think they're about 5-ish miles apart, okay, which is kind of far when you're trying to run in the desert and in the heat. So I definitely kept my Camelback with me, and I had some Scratch fuel in that. So I was always getting calories in. And then back to my favorite three things: the honey stinger waffles and the goos and the Cliff shot blocks. And then at the aid stations, kind of whatever looked good. Of course, had some pickles at some, and some oranges, and a couple potato chips for some salt. So, and then I did use base salt a lot to try to keep some of that hydration in.
Were you going off of like a set calorie per hour goal, or was it just like, I'll have a goo this hour and then shot blocks the next? Was it just kind of going off of feel, or was it more of a structure? Because I know my plans are always they're always very structured about how many calories and stuff I'm gonna be getting. So I'm just curious how you did it.
Yeah, mine was not as structured as yours, Travis, but it was a general goal of 100 liquid calories an hour and 100 solid calories an hour. So, enough Scratch in there, and trying to guesstimate. I mean, that's kind of a total guess when you're using a Camelback. You never really know exactly how much you're taking in,
Yeah.
But guesstimating there with, how many sips I was taking in, with how many scoops of Scratch I had in there. And then, taking in one goo or a honey stinger waffle, or like half a sleeve of shot blocks, too. So
nice.
In the heat, the liquid does better. And that's the oranges and the pickles and stuff like that does better than the really solid stuff, like a honey stinger waffle or even a shot block or something. So that was kind of on top of the plan to take down one of those specific snacks plus the Scratch.
Yeah, I know we've kind of had the same challenges with some of the biking events where the heat of the day is going to kick in, and you just have no desire to eat solid food. And I think it just, like, your body spends more energy and probably creates more heat. I'm not a nutritionist, I have no idea, but it just conceptually it seems like your body struggles more to digest the solid foods, and liquids like it just absorbs. And I don't know if it really works that way, but that's the way it feels, at least when I'm out there. So I'm kind of with you. I think the liquids in the heat of the day is by far the best approach. And I'm sure somebody that's a scientist out there can tell me I'm wrong, but I mean,
no, you're pretty much right.
Yeah.
The whole idea is that you're asking your body to pull blood away from cooling itself to digesting food, and one of two things will happen.
Let me guess.
One, your body will say, well, we're going too hard and I can't cool us. So in self-preservation mode, we are going to jettison everything that's in our stomach and in our intestines to save ourselves. And then the other is,
that sounds very enjoyable.
Okay, we're going too hard. Brain starts shutting him down or her down and make it really hard for them to produce any kind of power because we're overheating. Yeah. So that's, if you're lucky, you get the second one, and then you slow down and you digest, and you eventually you start to come around. If you're unlucky, you get the first one, and I've been on the receiving end of that unlucky time many a times.
Yeah, no thank you.
In the heat of the desert, I know what it's like. It's the worst.
Yeah, this year I went back and I did the 25K of Crazy Desert. And I had trained really well. And then for me, death taxes, and I will get some sort of sickness during taper. Unfortunately, this time I got a stomach bug 5 days out from the race. And I got over it before the race, but
damage is done.
The damage was done. I, was going on a very close to E from just the week and not being able to kind of build up my stores during the week. But then during the race itself, I found out as soon as I tried to start fueling on the go that something from the stomach bug was still left in there because I just could not get it to like absorb. And like my stomach and my hands and everything just swelled instantly when I was trying to take in nutrition. And so it got ugly fast and I was able to finish, but without fuel, it was not a good time. And it just was a good reminder of how important fueling is. And it didn't matter that I had all that great training. You know, had been shooting to go under 3 hours and I was a lot closer to like 3.5 hours, I think, because the goal just became just finish this.
That experience sounds like 1 star, would not recommend.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's lost a lot on you know, training for these ultra events. Just especially how much the nutrition leading up into it, or even in training, you know, for, you know, when you're putting in, you know, 10, 15 hours a week, you need to be eating like you're putting in that much effort, you know, like people just think that, oh, I'll just, you know, I can eat whatever and it'll be okay. And they, you know, they throw down a Big Mac and it's just, you know, their training suffers from it. Whereas like you get one little stomach bug leading into a race. I mean, that's a huge deal. I mean, you're talking about 3 or 4 days of not really absorbing any nutrition.
Yeah.
And just your body's just like, hey, I'm trying to fight this thing. I can't ask you to, like, you know, feed me or, you know, do anything because it's just not going to work. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
So now, like, so you're okay with doing the ultra marathon again, no stand-up marathons, and you're saying it's the pressure of not having like a time, but is there cutoff times in these events too, or no?
A lot of them do have cutoff times. Crazy Desert, I think their only cutoff time really applies to the 100K because they have all the way from 5K all the way up to 100K distances you can choose from.
Okay.
And really, the only cutoff is 24 hours for the 100K. So I didn't have to worry about any kind of cutoff time for that. Some ultra marathons do have some intermediate cutoff times and things like that. So I think you need to be cognizant of that. But as far as I can tell, people that I know who have done them, if you've trained and you aren't having like a serious issue where you're, you know, stuck vomiting in an aid station for 20 minutes or something, as long as you're able to keep moving at some sort of pace, not many people get pulled due to cutoff times.
Yeah.
For the ultra marathons.
So you mentioned the 100K. Is that something in your future?
I do not know.
She's like, I got my boundaries, and that's that's it.
Yeah. I don't know if
crazy.
I will ever even do another 50K. Really, it's just that if I had to do something longer than like a 25K, I would not do the marathon. I would skip over it to another 50.
What was what was your, for the 50K training, what was your like top mileage or top time week? Just curious, like for peak.
My longest singular run was just over 3 hours and it was like 17 miles. So really barely half of the long one, but my coach believes a lot in stacking runs. And so maybe the day before that, I had also done like an 8-mile run. Okay. And then tag the 17 onto that, which is a lot better than sending me out there to do a singular 25-mile run.
Yeah.
We did some of that for the Mesa training, not necessarily on purpose. There were a couple of times we did it by, you know, just because of the logistics and the weather around the area. But that, I think there's something to be said for that approach, because you can rack up a lot of miles in a weekend pretty fast and get a huge.
Yeah, we did that a lot in Ironman training. We would run like six miles after the long bike on the Saturday, and then the Sunday we would go and run 3 hours, which is, you know, we would basically be doing like 23, 24 mile runs, in the weekend. And then
Yeah.
you would do your normal, I think that idea of stacking, those just, I'm a big fan of not running over 3 hours. I just don't think there's any benefit in that. And I know it's from, I've gotten a lot of it from C26, which is the coaches that you work with, right, Britta?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're still with them, and those guys are freaking awesome. Like, they got a good podcast too. So a lot of I've spent a lot of time listening to them, Mike Torali and all those guys. So,
but yeah, I think the longest mileage week, I'm trying to remember. I want to say it topped out somewhere around like 43 miles for the total week. So it's really, I don't want to say that's not that far, because that is kind of far.
A lot, yeah.
Someone who's currently running like 12 miles a week, but 43 miles when the total race is 31, 32 miles. I didn't do any crazy 70, 80 mile weeks, anything like that. So,
but I think this is, you nailed a point just a minute ago, Britta, about how this run gave you the aerobic engine and probably a lot of the base that you needed to go into the swim. And that's something we've talked about a lot on the podcast, is like, I don't think many people just wake up one day and go, yeah, I think I'm going to get off the couch and go run a 50K. Like, so it's all about sort of using these events as a foundation and just building, consolidating that fitness, and then using that as the base for the next big event. And I think just sounds like the way that you've set up the last couple of years. I mean, my goodness, your fitness has to be through the roof right now.
It's been a really interesting journey, and it's fun to kind of yo-yo back and forth. Like I said, I'm about to go do my first sprint, and I saw you guys in Mesa where I did a 10K, and I was ramping up my running to do the Crazy Desert 25K a little bit, and then I kind of came back down. But I still swim, bike, or run almost every single day. And I mean, some of those, you can see on my Strava, some bike rides, it's like 45 minutes, which for you guys, again, I'm sure you wouldn't even bother getting out of bed at this point for a 45-minute run when you're training for what you're training for. But it has allowed me to do what it has essentially been like a 2.5 week build for this sprint. And I'm still pretty confident that the sprint will go fairly well. Because I just keep that base endurance year round.
Yep.
And if you don't have high intensity or really long things, it really never gets old, so to speak, to keep swimming, biking, running all the time. But it gives me a base to where when I decide, I want to go do this, I want to ramp up my running in the next 2 months to be able to do the 25K, it's easy to do that injury free when you do have that just base level of fitness.
And I know you're kind of joking about the 45 minutes, but all seriousness, like, if all people can eke out as a 45-minute ride in a day, then go eke out the 45 minutes, because you're going to get a tremendous benefit of even if just maintaining that fitness, you're going to get that benefit. And I think that's where a lot of people get sort of wrapped around the axle when they're training, or if they're hitting a really rough spot of consistency. It's like, just get on the bike, just lace up the shoes, just jump in the pool. Like, if 30 minutes is all you can give, then that's 30 minutes of maintenance that's going to pay off in dividends over time if you just find a way to get it done. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that, I know you guys talk a lot about how long some of your rides are, and maybe you don't want to get out the door, but I think if you can just convince yourself to go outside or get on the trainer or whatever it is and just start. Some days you are still going to call it at 45 minutes, but that's still better than if you just laid on the couch for those 45 minutes. And it does little things like, there have been a lot of days where I just opt to ride around my neighborhood for 45 minutes and do 50 million turns. And maybe my fitness didn't get better, my aerobic engine didn't get bigger, but my bike handling, got a little bit better from doing 50 million stops and starts and turns around the neighborhood. So there's little things like that you can find a little win, even if it is a super short workout.
That's a great point.
Yep, exactly. That's so good. So what are we thinking we're doing this year? What's the plan after we're doing the sprints? Is it going to be all sprints, all Olympics year or Olympic year, or are you going to do you have any other crazy plans in the works?
Nothing crazy this year. This is kind of more of a family and life is busy year, so nothing super long. It just didn't work, and I do think that's an important consideration for people too. Is even if I really want to do a cool race that all my friends are doing, if it doesn't work with my life this year, then it's going to be miserable. I'm not going to be trained well. I could injure myself. Or, my family is going to end up suffering in a year that I was supposed to be focused on them. So taking all of that into account, there will be some more sprints. And then I'm going to do Ironman 70.3 Louisville, just the swim. I'm doing it as a relay with some people. So 1.2 miles swim there. And I'm kind of excited to see what I can do in a 1.2 mile swim when I don't have to bike and run after. So we'll see how fast that can go. And then I don't know, we'll see. Running's been going pretty well, and it's been a while since I PR'd 5K, 10K half. So maybe by fall, we'll see. But I may be flirting with, just jumping in a bunch of 5Ks and just redlining it and seeing if I can come out with an PR.
See how that's until the wheels come flying off.
Yeah, right.
I love it.
But I think, I you hear this all the time about athletes who do a lot of endurance level training and how much that helps out their max efforts because your aerobic engine is so strong. And then, it's with these short burst efforts, if you start working anaerobic, at least the theory is that, then you can, sort of lift that functional power, a little bit higher because you got such a solid foundation of aerobic. How are you finding your sort of short distance training coming along? Do you feel faster than you've ever felt before? Do you feel like there's just there's this extra little bit in the tank that you didn't know was there?
Not so far, but we'll see on race day.
Right.
I will say, to your point, all of my 5K, 10K half PRs, I set all of those in late fall of 2019.
Okay.
And it was after Serena and I had done Ironman 70.3 Augusta in September of 2019. And I hadn't been focused on speed necessarily most of that year. I was focused on the half distance. But like you said, exactly to your point, Danny, I had built that base so much that just adding in a little bit of speed work, I PR'd all three of those events that fall, building on the 70.3 engine.
Yeah. I'm anxious to follow and see how the year turns out for you, because I think, as you get deeper into the year and all of this shorter work, I think you're in for a heck of a year. I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
And it's crazy how much you can hurt from, the other day I did like a little run. I did a 40-minute run with 2 4-minute tempos in it. 8 minutes is not a long time, but that, it can hurt. It really can.
Just get done. You're like, I can't even walk now. It's so bad. It's like when I go to the gym and, I haven't been to the gym and I lift weights and I'm like, I can't even lift my arms up now. I'm so weak. It's just like, it's so hard. Yeah. It's just like, our bodies are so weird. They're just that resistance to change, it fights it so much. It's crazy. Because I know, me and Danny we ride this. There's this ride that we did in Excelsior Springs this last weekend, and it was 4,000 feet of climbing in 40 miles.
My God.
So it's
You
just,
guys are beasts.
it's climbing and climbing and climbing. And by the end, I was just like, I'm just done climbing. Like my legs hurt. I'm done.
Whoa.
I want to be done.
Travis was done climbing.
Yeah, no, I was like, hey, yeah, that's chalk that one up. You'll never see that again. But
Yeah.
but we were in this headwind, and I look over. It's like, Travis, I thought we were going to back off the pace a little bit. He's like, I just want to be done. Suffer sooner, lived its life in that ride.
Yeah, and that's the way it is. And then I was telling Danny, I was like, if it was 5 degrees warmer and the day was a little bit nicer, like I would have probably had a different attitude, or whatever. Like it wasn't that I was just done with climbing the hills, like the steep, punchy hills. I could go and ride it today and I'd probably have a, more positive outlook, but just, there's just some days where you're just like, man, I just don't want to do this right now. I could do anything else. And it was just one of those days. We all have them. But
you are going to remember that when you're in the middle of Unbound and it's sucking so bad. And those are the days that are going to come to mind. And like, you know what? I survived that 4,000 feet in a terrible wind in Excelsior Springs, and I'm going to survive this too.
Yeah. And that's what it is. It's always just, I think you probably know this too, is just having that, mentality of like, you train hard and you put in the work so that when it comes race day, you're just like, oh, I've already done all the hard stuff. Let's enjoy this day. You get to the point where you can actually enjoy what's going on. So
yeah, I can't wait to see what you guys do at Unbound this year, because your training on Strava has just been jaw-dropping. So I'm excited to follow that.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Well, Britta, is there anything you want to shout out about, like any charities or things that we should follow, or things we should look out for in the coming weeks or months?
Gosh, where do I start? I don't know. Charities, one that you guys know from back in the day, is close to my heart and kind of relates to this podcast, is Girls on the Run. And I love volunteering with the Kansas City chapter. And, whether it is getting girls into potentially doing what the three of us and Serena do on our craziest days, whether they want to do that kind of stuff someday, or they just learn the healthy habits. Big fan of any organization that helps kids live healthier lives.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, that's a great organization. Is there a way of getting in contact with them, or that you would suggest that somebody go about doing if they want to get involved with this organization?
You can just search Girls on the Run Kansas City on Facebook or Instagram. They also have a website. I'm sure if you just Google Girls on the Run Kansas City, and you can see some volunteer opportunities. I think their spring 5K is probably right around the corner. I don't know the exact date, but you can volunteer at a 5K where like 1,000 girls are running a 5K together, or you can coach, you can donate, any of that kind of stuff.
That's great. Awesome.
But thank you guys so much for having me on, and can't wait to keep following along with all of your suffering.
Oh, I can't wait to see, how you get on with it. And we're going to have you on again. Cause I would love to dissect more about, your feelings on Ironman and, all that other fun stuff. But, I think as far as, the first time, coming out and hanging out with us and have us talk about suffering is great. Yep. So thank you, Britta,
for having me, guys.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Please, if you like what we are doing here, leave a like, rate us, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. It really helps us grow and finds us more Suffer Sooner squad mates. And remember, when the finish line feels impossibly far away, we don't give up, we push harder, we dig deeper, and we find solace in the knowledge that our suffering is temporary and our resilience is forever.